The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a deep rumble that echoed through the vast space. Jiho Kim walked forward, his black diplomatic uniform sharp against the colorful robes and strange forms of the alien representatives seated in their towering chairs. The chamber was built to make newcomers feel small, and it worked perfectly. Jiho had been Earth's ambassador for 3 years now. 3 long years of sitting in the back rows, watching the 12 senior races make decisions that affected billions of lives across the galaxy. Humans were considered a junior species, barely worth listening to. Their votes counted for almost nothing. Today was different, though. Today, Sura Park sat beside him, clutching a datapad that contained proof of something terrible. She was nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she prepared to address beings who saw her as little more than a clever pet. The council chamber held representatives from across the galaxy. The Veltari looked like giant insects with golden shells. The hegemony members were tall and pale, with black eyes that never seemed to blink. There were others too. Creatures with tentacles, beings made of what looked like living crystal, and things that defied easy description. At the center sat the Council Prime, an ancient Veltari named Zakth, who had held power for over 200 years. His voice boomed through the chamber as he called the session to order. "We begin with reports from junior species," he announced, his tone making it clear this was just a formality. "The human delegation may proceed." Jiho stood and bowed slightly, following the proper protocol. "Honored Council, we present Dr. Sura Park, our chief xenobiologist. She has made an important discovery regarding the plague affecting the Outer Rim colonies." Sura rose on shaking legs. She had spent months preparing this moment, gathering evidence that would shock the galaxy. The plague killing millions on distant worlds wasn't natural. It was manufactured. And she could prove it. "Honored members," she began, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. "I have analyzed samples from 17 affected worlds. The disease shows clear signs of artificial creation. The genetic markers are too precise, too targeted to be natural evolution." She activated her datapad, and holographic displays filled the air above the council floor. Charts, graphs, and molecular structures rotated slowly, showing her research in clear detail. "More importantly," Sura continued, "I have traced the origin point. The plague was created in hegemony biolabs using techniques that only they possess. This is not a natural disaster. It is genocide." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant humming and chittering of the various alien delegates stopped. Sura had just accused one of the most powerful council races of mass murder. The hegemony representative, a tall being called Mordeth, stood slowly. His voice was cold and flat when he spoke. "These are serious accusations from a species barely capable of interstellar travel. Where is your proof beyond these interpretations of data?" Sura's hands tightened on her datapad. "The molecular signatures are unique to hegemony biotechnology. The delivery method matches their standard pathogen dispersal systems. The timing of outbreaks follows their trade routes exactly." "Coincidence," Mordeth said dismissively. "The Council has always known that junior species lack the sophistication to properly analyze complex biological data." Council Prime Zakth raised one clawed hand. "The accusations are noted, but without absolute proof we cannot act against a senior member. This matter is closed." Jiho felt his jaw clench. Closed. Millions were dying, and they were calling it closed because the evidence came from humans? Before he could respond, another voice cut through the chamber. Commander Minho Lee, Earth's military liaison, had stood up in the observer section. He wasn't supposed to speak during council sessions, but protocol meant nothing when facing such injustice. "Honored Council," Minho called out, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "If we cannot act on the plague, then surely we can address the Kethli situation. The data there is clear and undeniable. The Kethli were a peaceful species known throughout the galaxy for their art and philosophy. For the past 6 months, they had been under attack by raiders who burned their cities and enslaved their people. The raiders were well armed and well coordinated, clearly backed by someone with serious resources. The Kethli have requested military intervention, Minho continued. Their people are being slaughtered while we debate procedure. We have traced the raiders' weapons to hegemony sources. We have recordings of hegemony ships in Kethly space. How much proof do you need? Council Prime Zakth's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Commander Lee, you are out of order. The Council maintains strict neutrality in regional conflicts. Neutrality? Minho's voice rose. You call genocide a regional conflict? The hegemony has denied involvement, Zakth replied. Without absolute proof, we cannot interfere in the internal affairs of sovereign systems. Jiho watched the exchange with growing horror. The Council wasn't interested in justice or truth. They were protecting their own, maintaining a system that had kept them in power for thousands of years. The evidence didn't matter, the lives didn't matter. Only the hierarchy mattered. Sura was still standing beside him, tears of frustration running down her face. Months of work, undeniable proof of mass murder, and they had dismissed her in minutes. Not because her evidence was wrong, but because she was human. Jiho made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. He stood slowly, his movement drawing attention from across the chamber. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the vast space. Honored Council Prime, the Earth delegation formally withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. In 3,000 years of Council history, no species had ever voluntarily left. It simply wasn't done. Zakth's voice cracked with shock. Ambassador Kim, surely you cannot be serious. Earth cannot survive without Council protection and trade agreements. Jiho smiled grimly. We came here seeking justice and found only bureaucracy wearing the mask of wisdom. If the Council will not act to stop genocide, then the Council has no moral authority to govern. He turned to face the assembled delegates, his voice growing stronger. We will not be part of a system that values politics over lives. Earth hereby recalls all diplomatic personnel and suspends all cooperation with Council initiatives. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages, some demanding explanations, others calling for sanctions against humanity. Through it all, Jiho stood calmly, waiting for the noise to die down. When it finally did, Mordeth spoke again, his voice dripping with contempt. You cannot survive alone, humans. Your technology is primitive, your military is weak, and your economy depends on Council trade. You will come crawling back within months, begging for readmission. Jiho gathered his papers and nodded to Sura and Minho. As they walked toward the chamber doors, he called back over his shoulder. Perhaps, but we will return with clean hands and clear consciences. Can you say the same? The doors closed behind them with a final echoing boom. 6 months had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council, and the galaxy was starting to notice something unexpected. Earth wasn't collapsing. Instead, human colonies were growing faster than ever before. Daeho Choi stood in the main engineering bay of the orbital shipyard above New Seoul, watching his teams work on the latest batch of colony ships. The vessels looked nothing like the Council-approved designs that humans had been forced to use for decades. These ships were sleek, efficient, and built with technologies that the Council had labeled as dangerously experimental. How many more? This week? Asked his assistant, looking up from a work tablet. 12, Daeho replied, wiping grease from his hands. And each one can carry twice as many colonists as the old ships, using half the fuel. The Council had always insisted that certain technologies were too dangerous for younger species. Fusion cores above certain power levels, AI-assisted navigation, quantum communication arrays. All forbidden until a species proved they were mature enough to handle them safely. What the Council never mentioned was that they were keeping other species weak on purpose. Free from those restrictions, human engineers had made incredible advances in just 6 months. Ships that once took years to build now rolled off production lines in weeks. Colony equipment that used to break down constantly now lasted for decades. Yuna Shin reviewed the latest expansion reports from her office in the Human Colonial Authority, headquarters. The numbers were staggering. In half a year, Humanity had established more new colonies than in the previous decade under Council oversight. The Kepler system is fully terraformed, her aide reported. The atmospheric processors finished 3 months ahead of schedule. Yuna nodded, making notes on her tablet. The Council's terraforming guidelines had been designed to take centuries, keeping younger species dependent on older ones for livable worlds. Human scientists had ignored those guidelines completely, developing techniques that turned barren rocks into garden worlds in just a few years. The methods were aggressive, using controlled nuclear reactions and engineered bacteria that Council scientists had deemed recklessly dangerous. But they worked, and they worked fast. Every new human world was proof that the Council's caution had been holding everyone back. Across the galaxy, word was spreading through hidden networks and underground communications. Taik Wan, once a Council liaison officer, now spent his time contacting oppressed species throughout known space. His messages were simple but powerful. Humanity had broken free, and they were willing to share what they had learned. Wan's small ship, the Free Spirit, dropped out of hyperspace near a mining world controlled by the hegemony. The planet's native population, a species called the Joric, had been reduced to slave labor in their own mines. For 300 years, they had extracted rare metals for their hegemony masters while living in poverty. "This is Taik Wan calling, mining station Alpha 7. He broadcast on the old emergency frequencies. I have a delivery for the Underground Railroad." Within hours, Wan was sitting in a hidden cave complex with Joric resistance leaders. He pulled data crystals from his pack and handed them to the rebels. "Weapons designs," he explained. "Medical equipment blueprints, power generation systems. Everything you need to level the playing field." The Joric leader, an elderly female named Kesra, examined the crystals with wonder. "These technologies, they are far beyond what the hegemony allows us." "That's the point," Wan smiled. "The Council has been keeping everyone weak while the senior races stay strong. These designs will change that." He had visited 17 worlds in the past month, always bringing the same gifts, knowledge and hope. Each world he left was a little more dangerous to its oppressors, a little closer to freedom. Meanwhile, the hegemony was growing worried about humanity's rapid expansion. They had expected Earth to come crawling back within weeks, begging for readmission to the Council. Instead, human colonies were spreading like wildfire, and their technology was advancing at an alarming rate. Mordeth stood before the hegemony high command, his pale face grim. "The humans have established 17 new colonies in 6 months. Their ships are faster than ours, their weapons are more advanced, and their colonies are becoming self-sufficient at an unprecedented rate." "Impossible," growled General Korthas, the hegemony's military commander. "They are a primitive species. How can they advance so quickly?" "By ignoring Council safety protocols," Mordeth replied. "They are using technologies we declared too dangerous and somehow making them work." The High Command made a decision that would prove to be a terrible mistake. They would force humanity back into line with a show of strength. The human colony of New Busan would be their target, a wealthy, agricultural world with minimal defenses. It would be quick, clean, and send a clear message to any other species thinking of following humanity's example. Commander Ari Zhang received the warning from her sensor operators just as the hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 12 heavy cruisers and a dreadnought, more than enough firepower to reduce New Busan to ash. "All civilian ships, evacuate to the outer system immediately," she ordered from the bridge of her flagship, the Sol. "Defense fleet, take positions." The hegemony commander opened a communication channel, his voice full of arrogant confidence. "Human vessels, you are in violation of Galactic Council directives. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded." Ari looked at her tactical display. 7 human ships against 13 hegemony vessels. The aliens expected this to be easy. They had no idea what they were walking into. "Hegemony fleet," she replied calmly. "You are trespassing in sovereign human space. You have 30 seconds to withdraw before we consider you hostile." The alien commander laughed. "Primitive humans with their toy ships think they can threaten the hegemony? Open fire. The battle that followed lasted exactly 18 minutes. Human ships moved like nothing the hegemony had ever seen, using gravity manipulation and quantum tunneling effects that shouldn't have been possible. Their weapons cut through hegemony shields like they weren't there. The dreadnought, pride of the hegemony fleet, was the first to die. A single human ship called the Incheon appeared from nowhere, fired once and disappeared again. The massive alien vessel simply came apart, its hull dissolving into component atoms. Within minutes, the rest of the hegemony fleet was fleeing toward hyperspace. They never made it. Human ships appeared around them like ghosts, picking off the alien vessels one by one with surgical precision. When the last hegemony ship exploded, Ari opened a channel to the retreating escape pods. "Tell your masters that humanity defends what is ours. Next time, they should bring more ships." News of the battle spread through the galaxy's underground networks within days. The mighty hegemony, one of the Council's strongest members, had been utterly destroyed by a handful of human vessels. For the first time in millennia, oppressed species across the galaxy began to believe that the Council's power wasn't absolute. On a dozen worlds, resistance movements that had been hiding in shadows for centuries began to plan. On mining stations and factory planets, enslaved populations started whispering about hope. In the grand chambers of the Galactic Council, senior members began to realize that their perfectly ordered galaxy was starting to crack. The humans hadn't just left the Council. They had shown everyone else that leaving was possible. And more importantly, they had proven that freedom was worth fighting for. The news reached the Kethli homeworld on a cold morning, when the twin suns cast long shadows across the crystal cities. Elder Vashiti listened to the underground broadcast with growing amazement. The humans had not only survived outside the Council, they had defeated a hegemony fleet. "If the humans can stand against the Council," she whispered to her aide, "perhaps we can too." The Kethli had suffered for months under the raiders' attacks. Their beautiful cities lay in ruins. Their people lived in constant fear, and the Council did nothing. The evidence was clear that the hegemony was behind the attacks, but the Council maintained their so-called neutrality. Vashti made a decision that would shake the galaxy. She called together the High Assembly and announced that the Kethli were withdrawing from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The announcement sent shockwaves through the Council chambers on Nexus Prime. 2 species leaving in less than a year was unprecedented. But worse news was coming. Dr. Hayuk Nam arrived on the Kethli homeworld 3 days after their declaration of independence. His ship, the Digu, carried more than medical supplies and relief workers. Hidden in its cargo holds were defensive technologies that would make the beautiful world nearly impossible to attack. "These are shield generators," Hyuk explained to Kethli engineers as they unloaded the equipment. "They can protect entire cities from orbital bombardment." The Kethli engineers studied the human designs with wonder. The technology was elegant and powerful, using energy manipulation techniques that the Council had forbidden for centuries. "How do you make them so efficient?" asked Gentai, the lead Kethli scientist. "By ignoring Council safety regulations," Hyuk smiled. "They told us these power levels were dangerous. They were lying. They just didn't want us to be strong enough to defend ourselves." Within weeks, every major Kethli city was protected by energy shields that could stop anything short of a planet-killing weapon. When the raiders tried their next attack, they found their weapons useless against the new defenses. The Kethli, inspired by human courage and armed with human technology, drove the attackers away completely. Meanwhile, Captain Nara O was leading her own kind of war against the Council. Her ship, the Mokpo, specialized in rescue operations that the Council preferred to ignore. Prison worlds were scattered throughout Council space, planets where dissidents, free thinkers, and political prisoners were sent to disappear forever. The Council claimed these worlds didn't exist, but humanity had found them, and now they were emptying them. Nara stood on the bridge of her ship as they approached prison world Gamma 7. The planet held over 10,000 prisoners, beings whose only crime was asking questions the Council didn't want answered. "Stealth systems are holding," reported her tactical officer. "They don't know we're here." The rescue was swift and precise. Human soldiers, using powered armor that made them invisible to most sensors, infiltrated the prison compounds. Within hours, they had disabled the guards and freed the prisoners. The operation was so clean that the prison administrators didn't realize what had happened until the rescue ships were already jumping to hyperspace. Among the rescued prisoners was Dr. Colvin, a brilliant Veltari scientist who had been imprisoned for 40 years. His crime had been discovering that the Council was deliberately suppressing technological advancement across the galaxy. "They have archives," he told Nara, as her medical team treated his injuries. "Hidden databases containing thousands of years of confiscated research, technologies that could have ended poverty, disease, and suffering across the galaxy." "Where are these archives?" Nara asked. "Nexus Prime," Colvin replied. "In the Council's deepest vaults, but the security there is impossible to breach." Nara smiled grimly. "We'll see about that." Back on Earth, President Borakang was dealing with an unexpected problem. The Council, faced with their first real crisis in millennia, was sending desperate, diplomatic messages to humanity every day. They offered trade deals, technology sharing agreements, and even voting reform. Anything to get the humans back. "They're scared," observed her foreign minister as they reviewed the latest batch of communications. "They never expected other species to follow our example." Bora nodded, reading through a particularly desperate message from Council Prime Zakath. The ancient Veltari was offering humanity senior member status, something that had never been granted to a species less than 1,000 years old. "Too little, too late," she said, filing the message with all the others. "Justice delayed is justice denied." The real breakthrough came when Admiral Junho Yu made a discovery that would change everything. His fleet had captured a Council data relay station during a routine patrol, and what they found in its memory banks was staggering. "It's all here," he reported to Earth Command via quantum communication. 3,000 years of deliberate manipulation. They haven't just been suppressing our technology. They've been keeping the entire galaxy primitive. The data showed the full scope of the Council's crimes. Diseases that could have been cured centuries ago were allowed to spread. Energy technologies that could have provided unlimited power were banned. Even basic manufacturing techniques were restricted to keep younger species dependent on Council trade. But the worst discovery was the population control protocols. The Council had been secretly sterilizing entire species, keeping their numbers low so they couldn't challenge Council authority. Billions of beings across the galaxy had been denied the chance to have children, all to maintain the status quo. Within days of the discovery, underground networks across the galaxy were broadcasting the evidence. Species that had loyally served the Council for centuries learned that they had been betrayed and manipulated from the very beginning. The effect was immediate and devastating. 3 more species announced their withdrawal from the Council within a week. Industrial worlds that produced essential goods suddenly cut off trade with Council space. Mining operations stopped shipping rare materials to Council worlds. The galactic economy, which had been built on the exploitation of subject species, began to collapse. Ships couldn't get fuel. Factories couldn't get raw materials. Food shipments stopped reaching the core worlds where Council members lived in luxury. On Nexus Prime, emergency sessions of the Council ran day and night. The Veltari were demanding military action against the rebels. The hegemony wanted to negotiate. Other species were quietly making plans to switch sides. Council Prime Zakth looked out at the half-empty chamber. In 3 months, they had lost 6 species, including some of their most productive members. The remaining delegates were arguing constantly, unable to agree on any course of action. "Perhaps," suggested the Andorian representative, "we should consider reform. The humans have made valid points about our governance." "Reform?" Zakth's mandibles clicked angrily. "We have maintained galactic peace for 3 millennia. These rebels threaten the very foundations of civilization." But even as he spoke, another message arrived. The Joric had declared independence, using human-supplied weapons to drive their hegemony masters from their homeworld. The mining operations that supplied essential materials to Council space had stopped completely. In the space of less than A year, humanity had gone from being an ignored junior member to the spark that was burning down the Council's empire, and the fire was spreading faster than anyone could control. The galaxy that had been stable for 3,000 years was coming apart, and there was no way to put it back together. The age of the Galactic Council was ending, and something new was about to be born. The War Council meeting on Nexus Prime was filled with tension and desperation. Council Prime Zacht looked around the table at the remaining loyal species. Half the galaxy had rebelled in less than a year, and the Council's authority was crumbling daily. "We have no choice," declared General Vexitar of the Andorian Navy. "If we don't crush this rebellion now, we lose everything." The plan was simple and brutal. Simultaneous attacks on all major human worlds, using the combined fleets of the remaining Council species. Without humanity's leadership and technology, the other rebel species would surrender quickly. "The humans are the key," Zacht agreed, his ancient voice filled with cold determination. "Remove them and the rebellion dies." What the Council didn't understand was that they were no longer fighting the same species that had begged for membership. Decades ago, humanity had grown stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than anyone imagined. Fleet Admiral Seo Kwan stood in the command center of Titan Station, watching the tactical displays as Council fleets moved throughout the galaxy. Earth's quantum sensors could track every ship movement within 100 light-years, giving human forces a massive advantage. "They're moving against all our major colonies at once," reported his intelligence chief. "Earth, New Sol, New Busan, Kepler Prime, and the Centauri worlds. Over 300 ships total." SEO studied the attack patterns, noting how the Council fleets moved in traditional formations that hadn't changed in centuries. "They still think this is going to be a conventional war." He activated the quantum communication network, connecting to human commanders across the galaxy. "All fleet commanders initiate Defense Protocol 7. Remember, our ships can do things theirs can't. Use that advantage." The first battle began in the Kepler system, where a Council fleet of 40 ships faced just 12 human vessels. The alien commander, confident in his overwhelming numbers, ordered a direct assault. The human ships seemed to vanish as the Council fleet approached. One moment they were there, the next they had disappeared completely from all sensors. The Council ships found themselves attacking empty space while invisible enemies struck from all directions. Human vessels used quantum tunneling to appear inside the Council formation, fire devastating shots, and disappear again before the aliens could respond. Each attack was precisely targeted, taking out weapon systems and engines without destroying the ships entirely. "What are they doing?" the Council commander screamed as his dreadnought's main guns were surgically removed by weapons that seemed to come from nowhere. His tactical officer was studying the readings with growing horror. "Sir, they're not using normal weapons. These energy signatures, they're manipulating reality itself." The battle was over in 20 minutes. The entire Council fleet was disabled, their crews alive, but their ships completely helpless. As rescue, ships arrived to collect the survivors. They found a message waiting for them. "Tell your masters that we don't want to kill you," the message said. "We just want you to leave us alone." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On New Sol, Council ships found themselves trapped in gravity wells that shouldn't have been possible. At Centauri Prime, human defenders used temporal manipulation to slow enemy missiles to a crawl before destroying them harmlessly. But the fiercest fighting was at Earth itself. Colonel Yun Ro watched from her underground command bunker as over 100 Council ships entered Earth's solar system. It was the largest fleet ever assembled for a single attack, with enough firepower to reduce a planet to rubble. "All planetary defense systems online," she reported to Admiral Seo. "Underground shelters are sealed and ready." The Council had expected to find a lightly defended world that would surrender quickly when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, they found that Earth had been turned into the most heavily fortified planet in the galaxy. The first wave of ships tried orbital bombardment, launching missiles and energy beams at Earth's major cities. The attacks never reached the surface. Massive shield generators hidden in ocean trenches and mountain ranges absorbed the incoming fire, and converted it into power for the defense network. Impossible, muttered the Veltari fleet commander as his weapons had no effect. No planetary shields are that strong. That's when Earth's real defenses revealed themselves. The planet itself seemed to come alive as hidden weapon platforms rose from the ground. Mountains opened to reveal massive railguns. Ocean surfaces erupted as submarine launch platforms surfaced. But the most shocking surprise was the asteroid belt. What the Council thought were normal space rocks were actually camouflaged weapon platforms. Hundreds of them, all controlled by advanced AI systems that humanity had perfected in secret. The Council fleet found itself surrounded and outgunned by an enemy they couldn't see until it was too late. Human weapons fired from every direction, using technologies that violated everything the Council thought they knew about physics. Dr. Ina Sewell and her research team had achieved what many thought impossible. They had cracked the Council's faster-than-light communication network. From her laboratory on Luna, she could monitor every message the enemy sent. Their command structure is falling apart, she reported to Earth Command. The fleet commanders are reporting contradictory orders from 3 different sources. The breakthrough came when her team discovered the network's master control nodes. Hidden in the quantum foam that connected all Council communications was a single point of failure. If they could capture it, they could take control of the entire network. "Where is it?" asked the officer coordinating the mission. Ina smiled grimly. "Nexus Prime, right in the heart of Council territory." Commander Gu Park led the strike force that would attempt the impossible, a raid on the most heavily defended station in the galaxy. His team of 12 ships, all equipped with the latest stealth technology, slipped through Council space like ghosts. "Target acquired," he reported as Nexus Prime appeared on their screens. The massive station was surrounded by defense platforms and patrol ships, but human stealth technology made them invisible to Council sensors. The assault was swift and precise. While the station's defenses looked outward for threats, human soldiers teleported directly into the command center using technology the Council had never seen. Within minutes, they had control of the entire communications network. "Downloading now," reported the team's computer specialist. 3,000 years of Council records, including all their classified research files. The data they recovered was staggering. Not only did it contain proof of every crime the Council had committed, but it also held the suppressed scientific knowledge of thousands of species. Technologies that could have transformed the galaxy centuries ago were sitting in digital vaults, gathering dust. But the most valuable discovery was the location of every Council black site, prison world, and secret facility. Within hours of the raid, human forces were spreading across the galaxy, liberating prisoners and freeing oppressed populations. The war's turning point came when the recovered data was broadcast across the galaxy on all frequencies. Every species, loyal or rebel, learned the full truth about their rulers. 3 millennia of lies and manipulation were exposed in a single transmission. The effect was immediate. Council fleets began surrendering without firing a shot as their crews learned what they had been fighting for. Entire star systems declared independence. Even species that had been Council members for thousands of years turned against their former leaders. On Nexus Prime, Council Prime Zakth watched his empire collapse in real time. Rebellion was spreading faster than his remaining forces could contain it. His own advisors were abandoning him as the truth spread. "Perhaps," he said to his empty chamber, "we should have listened to the humans when they first asked for justice. But it was far too late for regrets." The age of the Galactic Council was ending in chaos and revolution, brought down by a species they had dismissed as primitive and harmless. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Great Hall on Nexus Prime had been transformed. Where once the Galactic Council had held court in towering chairs that made petitioners feel small, now there were simple tables arranged in a circle. Every seat was the same height. Every voice carried the same weight. Director Hannah Lim looked around the room where the War Crimes Tribunal would soon begin. Former Council members sat beside the species they had oppressed for centuries. It was a scene that would have been impossible just 2 years ago. "Are you ready?" asked her assistant, a young Kethli lawyer named Ventar who had lost his family in the hegemony raids. Hannah nodded. gathering her files. The evidence was overwhelming. 3,000 years of documented crimes against billions of innocent beings. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure such tyranny could never rise again. The first defendant was Mordeth, the former hegemony representative whose arrogance had helped push humanity to leave the council. He sat calmly in the defendant's chair, showing no emotion as Hana read the charges. Genocide of the Veltari outer colonies through biological warfare, enslavement of 17 species, suppression of life-saving medical technologies resulting in the deaths of over 1 billion beings. The evidence was presented methodically. Medical records from the plague worlds, communication intercepts proving hegemony involvement, testimony from survivors who had lived through the horror. When it was over, Mordeth finally spoke. "We maintained order," he said simply. "For 3,000 years we kept the galaxy stable. You maintained your power," Hana replied. "There's a difference. The trials continued for months. Some defendants showed remorse for their crimes. Others, like Mordeth, remained convinced they had done nothing wrong, but all were judged by the same standard. The law applied equally to everyone. Not all punishments were harsh. Many council members who had been forced into compliance by the system were given community service, helping to rebuild the worlds they had helped destroy. But the leaders, those who had actively created and maintained the system of oppression, faced justice for their crimes. Meanwhile, Chancellor Kyung-woo was working on something even more important than punishment: building a better future. The new Galactic Federation was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Every species gets one vote," he explained to the Constitutional Convention. "It doesn't matter if you've been spacefaring for 10,000 years or 10 minutes. All voices are equal." The Veltari delegate, an elderly female named Zeska who had opposed the old council's policies, raised a concern. "But what about species with more experience? Surely their wisdom should carry more weight." "Wisdom isn't measured by age," replied the Joric representative, a former slave named Coles. "The old council had millennia of experience, and they used it to commit atrocities." The debates were fierce but fair. Every detail of the new government was argued, discussed, and voted on by representatives from over 100 species. Unlike the old council's rigid hierarchy, the Federation was built on the principle that all sentient life had value. The transformation of the galaxy was happening faster than anyone had imagined possible. Chief Science Officer Min Yu stood in what had once been the council's classified research facility, watching as teams of scientists from dozens of species worked together to release suppressed technologies. "The medical advances alone will save millions of lives," reported Dr. Kesra, the former Joric resistance leader who now headed the Federation's health department. "Diseases that have plagued our people for centuries can be cured in days." Minnie nodded, reviewing the latest reports. Regeneration technology that could regrow lost limbs, power sources that could provide unlimited clean energy, agricultural techniques that could turn desert worlds into gardens. All of it had been locked away in council vaults while beings suffered and died. "How long until we can implement these across the galaxy?" Min asked. "The medical technologies can be deployed immediately," Kesara replied. "The industrial applications will take longer, but within 5 years, poverty should be a thing of the past for every Federation world." It wasn't just technology that was transforming the galaxy. The social changes were even more profound. Species that had been kept separated by council policies were meeting and learning from each other for the first time. On the former prison world Gamma 7, now renamed Hope Station, beings from across the galaxy worked together to build something new. The Kethleys shared their artistic traditions. The Joric taught mining techniques. Humans contributed their talent for innovation and adaptation. "It's beautiful," said Dr. Colvin, the Veltari scientist who had been imprisoned for 40 years. He was watching a group of children from 6 different species playing together in the station's garden dome. "I never thought I would see such cooperation in my lifetime." The most important change was happening in the hearts and minds of ordinary beings throughout the galaxy. For the first time in millennia, they had hope. The future wasn't predetermined by ancient hierarchies. They could dream of something better and actually work to achieve it. Ambassador Dong Kim, who had taken over from his predecessor Jiho, stood before the first assembly of the Galactic Federation. Representatives from 127 species filled the hall, more than had ever gathered as equals in galactic history. "We gather today not as rulers and subjects," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "but as partners in building a better galaxy. Humanity didn't seek to conquer the stars. We sought to free them." The applause was thunderous, coming from beings who had never expected to have a voice in galactic affairs. Former slaves sat beside former masters, all equal under the Federation's laws. "Every species represented here has something unique to contribute," Dong continued. "The Kethli's wisdom, the Jorik's determination, the Veltari's scientific knowledge, humanity's innovation. Together, we are stronger than the sum of our parts." The Federation's first act was to officially abolish slavery throughout known space. The second was to establish the Universal Education Initiative, ensuring that every being in the galaxy would have access to knowledge that had once been restricted to the elite. But perhaps the most important decision was the establishment of the Truth Commission. Every species would have access to their complete history, including the crimes committed against them and the knowledge that had been hidden from them. As the assembly concluded, Dong looked out at the representatives preparing to return to their homeworlds. They carried with them more than just political agreements. They carried hope for a future where justice and freedom weren't just dreams. In the months that followed, the galaxy continued to transform. New trade routes opened as species that had been forbidden from direct contact began working together. Scientific discoveries accelerated as researchers shared knowledge freely for the first time in millennia. Most importantly, the Federation proved that democracy could work on a galactic scale. Disputes were settled through negotiation and law rather than force. Resources were shared based on need rather than power. The former Council worlds, stripped of their imperial authority, struggled to adapt to the new reality. Some, like the Veltari, embraced reform and became productive Federation members. Others, like the Hegemony, retreated into isolation, refusing to accept that their age of dominance was over. But the galaxy had moved beyond them. New generations grew up in a universe where cooperation was normal, where knowledge was free, and where every voice mattered. The dark age of the Galactic Council became just another chapter in history, a warning about what happened when power was concentrated in too few hands. Years later, when historians wrote about the Great Liberation, they would mark it as the moment when the galaxy truly became civilized. Not through conquest or domination, but through the simple recognition that all sentient beings deserve dignity, freedom, and the chance to reach for the stars. Humanity's greatest achievement wasn't their technology or their military victories. It was showing the galaxy that a better way was possible, and then having the courage to make it real.